Well, can I just say thank you so much to the Skycrafters community. Thank you so much of those of y'all who are tuning in live and to all of those of you that are watching this recording. We are so excited to have this conversation today. The topic, which is so topical right now, right? Mapping your career success in the cloud. And I want to say first and foremost, also, happy Pride Month to everyone. I hope you and your loved ones are well. And I was chatting with these leaders in the green room earlier, and y'all, they are such a wealth of knowledge, experience, and they're also pretty funny. No pressure. I'm so excited to introduce Mary Kay Stone, who's a manager of cloud solution architects at Trend Micro, Rachel Sweeney, who's a DevOps engineer at Pew Research Center, and Madeline Vanderbilt, who's a software developer and team lead at Trend Micro. I am so excited to dive in with them today, but I'm going to start first and foremost. Um, Mary Kay, do you maybe want to just say hi and maybe let our viewers know a little bit about your leadership background briefly?
Yeah. Hi, my name is Mary Kay Stone. So as far as leadership, I've only actually technically been a leader for about a year now. Prior to that, I've been, all over the board as far as, IT goes. I've done my time at help desks. I've been a project manager. I made a move into security about 6 years ago, which was totally new for me. So like I said, it was just last summer actually. So I'm just coming up on my 1 year anniversary that I was promoted to manager.
I love that. I love that. And thank you so much. And, the one thing I always tell everyone in my community, and for those of you who don't know me, by the way, sorry, I'm Tristan Lombard. I'm a community manager at Testum. And the one thing I always tell, anyone, in any of my community programs is everyone is a leader, whether you are leading projects, whether you and or leading teams, everyone is a leader. But I want to say as well, thank you so much for your service because help desk is real and we love you for it. So thank you. And next over, I would love to say, so Rachel, can you maybe tell our viewers a little bit about your leadership background briefly?
Of course. So yeah, I feel like mine doesn't fit in that traditional box, and I'm certainly not in my title. But I recently got into this field a couple years ago. My background is a degree in Chinese history, and I was working as an executive assistant at the time, and realized this was really the space I wanted to be in. So I just devoted a year to figuring out what do I need to know to go from where I was to where I am today. And since then, I've given 3 or 4 different talks. I had an article published in a book, and just tried to engage in the community as much as I possibly could to just soak up as much information as I possibly could. And I feel like that's opened up so many doors to me that I wouldn't have had access to otherwise. And so, yeah, that's how I got to where I am now.
I love that. And thank you so much for sharing because I think that y'all's experience, there is no traditional path, right? And I think that hearing your difference, right. I think that sharing briefly that is so important for our viewers watching as well, because we hope that the conversation today is going to inspire you all to see that and also give you some concrete strategies to help you continue to map your careers. Madeline, can you maybe share with us a little bit about your leadership background as well?
Sure. So I'm Madeline Vanderpelt. I've been at Trend Micro for a few years now, and I'm a team lead. So I have a team of about 7 people, including myself, and I get to manage a bunch of that. My team and I like to run a bunch of experiments based on books that we've read and different ideas that we have. So we're super open to collaboration, experimentation, learning. That's what I'm really all about, is learning. And I've started some cool initiatives as well, like Teaching Thursdays. If anybody's read the Unicorn Project, you might recognize that. Took some inspiration from there. So I'm all about that sort of, yeah, exactly, all about that sort of learning adventure. And yeah, that's what I do.
I will say, like, I think that continuous learning is part of any, career advancement. This is something that Mike Lyles, he's the director of QA at Bridgetree, and he always says, testing is not a 9 to 5 job. And your manager is not going to give you all the educational resources, and you need to do a part of that yourself. I think the other part is accountability and finding a community of continuous learners. And I already have to say, Madeline, not just that we're wearing the same colors today, but I think we already are going to be book twins. So I love this. And I want to thank you all for introducing yourselves and sharing a little bit of leadership background. I cannot tell you how many of these meetups and stuff that we all see where people just do superfluous talk and don't take away any concrete strategies. And for all of you that are tuning in for this discussion today, we are getting some concrete strategies. We are sharing some real authentic stories, and we're going to help you all continue to provide guidance as you map out your careers in the cloud. I will just dive into some hot topics, y'all, if that's okay. So, one of the first questions that I have for y'all is we're thinking a lot about, right, for any of our viewers that are watching, whether you are just starting out in your career in cloud or maybe you're a more senior level leader, I'm wondering for y'all, what would you say are the top 3 skills needed to be a successful cloud engineer today? And I'd love to start with my Rachel.
I think kind of like what Madeline said, so much of it is curiosity because skills change so much over time. And so what I learned even just 2 years ago is something that is not, it just changes so much, and it's something that I might have to keep working at and keep learning. And so I think for me, one of my greatest skills that's helped me so much is just trying to figure out, like, why does this work the way it does, and just kind of getting at the core underlying things that relate to what it is that I'm doing. And then for me personally, it's a lot of things like working with containers or working with something in AWS, and just trying to figure out, from my perspective of being new to this field, like, what are the most commonly used tools that have the biggest traction in the market, and trying to dive into those and just understanding what is the mental model of how they work, and then how can I interact with them. And for me, breaking into a job, that was the thing that I think helped me the most, was just identifying which platform was the most used, what tools were the most used, and going from there. And it kind of all ties back to that curiosity of just wanting to know, like, why these work the way they do, and figuring out how everything interoperates and locks into place, and why they do that. What's the point of doing all this? And so yeah, I think for me, that's how I would answer that question.
I love that. I love that. What about for you, Madeline?
So definitely continuous learning, like I already mentioned. I'm a huge proponent of that. I think another big skill would be communication.
Okay.
Those sort of core skills that pretty much everybody needs. But I think especially working in these new spaces, being able to ask for help, ask questions, being open to, joining communities and learning from other people, and communicating with them, I think is really key. And that sort of open-mindedness, you don't always have all the answers, and being open-minded to hearing other people's approaches and what they've learned from their failures. Um, and also accepting failure as like a part of life. I think you learn way more from a failure than you do from a success in a lot of cases. And on my team, we actually celebrate failures at the end of the week. We go around and we're like, did anybody have an oops moment today, this week? Anything you want to share? And I think that's sort of really helpful in that journey.
I love that. And I think that's super, super insightful. And we can talk a lot about learning from failures. And we're going to come back to that. And we're also going to come back to Rachel and talking about emerging technologies, because I love that. And that's going to be really important for y'all who are listening, because we want to make sure y'all who are listening are staying up to date with the latest trends. I'm wondering for you, Mary Kay, what would you say for you is like a top skill needed to be a successful cloud engineer today?
Well, I mean, I completely agree with everything that both of them said because
Yep.
they stole what I was going to say.
Okay, that's real.
But in addition to that, yeah, I mean, adaptability. It's especially like help desk and like that. It's like somebody opens up a ticket, they're going to put in a technology you have never heard before. You are on the phone with the customer and you are googling. I mean, it's yeah, but it's great. But you've got to be willing to get in there, dig in there, and figure it out and stuff like that.
Mhm.
I mean, to get a little more concrete, I know one skill that I've noticed is missing with a lot of people that I'm seeing
Mm.
is a lot of people are shying away from scripting. I've got a lot of people that are trying to go into some of this cloud world, and they're learning how to build and all stuff like that, but they're shying away from the scripting. And I know it may not be everybody's forte, but
Mm.
you're going to have to get in there and learn some of it because everything is going that direction.
Mm.
It's all going GUI-less, so it's like the future's here, that kind of thing. So that's a
Mhm.
little bit more of a specific, but and I don't even care what language, just something.
Yeah, and I think that's a beautiful, beautiful follow up because when we're thinking about this, right, and what are some of the emerging technologies that we should all be looking out for in 2021? And I just in the chat and to anyone who's watching as well, I apologize to all of those marketing blogs out there, top things to look out in 2021. I get it, it's for SEO purposes. Don't kill us. What I will say though is I do think it is important to keep an eye out as a leader and a manager and also a practitioner in this industry. And so I guess following up on that question, Mary Kay, when you're talking about that, are there any other emerging technologies that we should be on the lookout for right now?
Well, so since I'm security, we're going to look a lot at the security stuff, and you see a lot of this about XDR and about the threat hunting and all that stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look out there on the percentages of how many jobs are available in cybersecurity and how many people there are to fill it, yeah, it's scary. And also speaking as a woman in tech too, it's even scarier because I think the last time I looked at stats, it was something like it was like only 20% are women in that field, but it continues to grow. That's going to continue to be a big topic. I mean, bad guys aren't ever going to go away. And even if that's not going to be your primary job responsibility, we're seeing it where it's becoming everybody's responsibility in the organization. So you need to learn something about cybersecurity and all that, whether you like it or not. So that's one area I would definitely look at for sure. I also probably would hedge my bets and look at more than one cloud technology. A lot of people are going all in on AWS, but what we're seeing is we're seeing a lot of people don't want to get locked in. They don't, some of them have, some bad feelings from the past where you picked a vendor and you were stuck with that vendor for 10 years and they don't want that anymore. So they got a little bit here and a little bit there. And so it helps if a little bit of everything. Don't be afraid to be the jack of all trades. You know?
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And I think that's one of the number one things. Security, so in software testing, security is the most in demand. Like, can we talk about the recent pipeline hacking? Can we talk about the recent largest meat producer factory in the US? And I think arguably in the world being hacked. This is constant. So I love that focus. I would ask the same question over to you, Rachel.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Mary Kay with security being kind of everybody's role. And having just gone through a job hunting process myself and, got a new role now at Fairwinds that I'm looking forward to next week. Throughout that whole process, I kept seeing Terraform pop up over and over again because if you can write something as infrastructure as code, rather than, just reducing toil in general, the less manual stuff you have to do, the better. And certainly with automation being such a core component, I feel like that's why, from a DevOps engineer perspective, there's so much of Terraform, putting things into containers, CI/CD pipelines, whether it's Jenkins or GitHub Actions, just a lot of those I feel like are the core technologies that I see or have experienced with, and eventually ending up in Kubernetes where you have a full-blown container orchestration system. And yeah, just throughout that entire process, keeping security in mind of looking at things of how can this be broken into or where are the vulnerabilities or secrets being leaked, just trying to think from that perspective of, where are the weaknesses in the system and how can we constantly improve on it. And so, yeah, I feel like those are some of the tools that I commonly see and work with.
I love that, and I think also too, in the spirit of, I like to keep these conversations lively, and I also know this time goes by really quickly. So I want to actually ask a different question to you, Alan, because you have an exceptional portfolio of experience. You are managing a large team, in my opinion. So bless you and thank you for your service again. For you, though, I'm wondering for our audience and viewers, how do you build a cloud portfolio that will really help you stand out as a candidate?
Oh, that's a big question.
I know, existential, really.
I think some of the technologies that Mary Kay and Rachel mentioned definitely go a long way. If you can infrastructure as code, if you can write infrastructure as code, you're already ahead of the person who can't and the person who's never seen it before. I think whether that's through Terraform or serverless or CloudFormation or whatever other technologies there are. Even just having that experience with one of those tools, then you can translate that to a bunch of other tools. Because, you know, what I work with today, the languages, the tools I work with today are not the same things that I worked with a year ago or 3 years ago. So I think another thing is showing that willingness to adapt, and that ability to learn new things, new tools, new technologies, problem solving. And I think want to sort of to build that portfolio, like you mentioned, get out there in the community, write blog posts, interact with people, learn from everybody you can, because the more of those people you interact with, the more connections you make, that can only serve to help you.
I love that. I think that's really powerful. And I think, part of that, and we talked about this before when it comes to like continuous learning, right? And I think for you, Mary Kay, I love your background so much. And I'm curious for you, when we're talking about continuous learning and we're talking about resources, I'm really keen to know for you, what are your top three go-to resources for learning and skills development?
So it changes. So like on Google, I'm following several topics and things. So it's not a specific source. Maybe it's just whatever comes up in my feed. Like I'm following cybersecurity, things like that. I'm following Linux, AWS. So when articles come up, and I find something interesting, I go to wherever the source is. If I'm trying to learn, like I'm trying to recertify for AWS, things like that, I'll go to Udemy. Look for the best rated, courses. I'll go there. I'm big on our documentation. I like to work, on our with our docs team especially, and so I do like actually looking at the company's documentation whenever I'm looking at some of these things. Trying to think where else. Usually it's things that come up as people share them. So like we're big on Slack, and so at the company somebody will say, "Hey, I saw this article," and they'll throw it up on Slack, and it's like, "Oh, okay, that's interesting." Yeah. Other than that, I'm also I like probably a little plug that Corey Quinn that last week at AWS, love his stuff. Yeah, exactly. You're always learning new things from that and such, and yeah, and I love his sense of humor.
Can we please just like Corey Quinn, we're going to start a campaign. We hope that you are watching this, Corey, and we will make sure that you do. And I will haunt you on Twitter, Corey. I will say, and yes, yes, yes to all of that. Yes. What I like to do is I like to follow alerts on Google News that are important for me, right? So whether it's low code, whether it's test automation, maybe spoiler alert, don't follow continuous testing during a global panini, y'all. Big mistake, big mistake. But the other thing I would say as well is people often shy away from social media because it's overwhelming, it's a lot. And as a closeted introvert moonlighting as an extrovert, I 100% agree. I will say, do not underestimate Twitter. I've made my best networking through LinkedIn. I've made my best knowledge sourcing through Twitter. Truly, truly. I would ask the same thing for you, Madeline. What is your go-to resource for knowledge? And we are, by the way, going to chime in for y'all submitting in the Q&A. We're going to get to you. We're definitely going to celebrate your questions. But Madeline, what's your go-to for learning?
Personally, I actually really like books. If you look at my desk, it's got a pile of them right now. And we have a little book club going at work, so that's really cool. You get to talk about them with other people. And everybody ends up with a really different perspective. You've all read the same words, but somehow we all have different takes. So I actually think discussing the things that you've learned and read, or even if it was a blog post that somebody shared, having that discussion, whether it's in Slack or in person, I think is actually the best way to really solidify that learning. So my go-to is sort of, more reading, like blog posts and books. But yeah, I think the discussion is really where you absorb it all.
I love that. And Rachel's taking all my cues. Yes, Rachel.
I wanted to add that one thing that I think is and it's been mentioned here before, but one of the most incredible resources that we have available to us is a very accessible community that's really not that large. And so we have all of the experts in this community right at our fingertips via Slack or Twitter or wherever. And
Mm-hmm.
so many times when I'm, doing exactly as Madeline said, just reading a book or something, or have some resource where I'm learning something new, if something doesn't 100% stick, like maybe I've got 90% of it, I will just go ask in the community and be like, so why exactly was this design implementation done this way? And so many times, like, I've actually made mentors that way just by asking questions. And, eventually you'll find people that are open to answering your questions, and then just kind of just, soaking all of that up as much as possible. And yeah, I found that really, really valuable.
I love that. And I think that's a really good point to bring up here too, is thinking about continuous learning and thinking about that from both a mentorship and a sponsorship perspective. And I guess my question to you, Mary Kay, as well, is do you mentor or sponsor any of your peers, or are there any people in the community that you seek guidance from? Like, what does that look like? Because I feel like part of mapping your career is really starting to echo Rachel, really lean out to your community, right? And really start to look for other connections. And so maybe mentorship is part of it. Maybe it's also about like accountability partners, but like, do you seek that out as well in your learning, Mary Kay?
That's actually a tough one. It was actually a question I recently posted onto Skycrackers because I was wondering how people go out and find mentors and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I can't say that I have a great answer in that case. I know that I have mentored a few people kind of indirectly. It's not like anybody came to me and said, "Hey, can you mentor me?" You know,
Mm-hmm.
it was it was more like, these people were interested in what I had to say. I thought that they had a lot of potential, and we just started working together. And I'm happy to share any knowledge I've got with them.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think I've ever done anything formal. So yeah, I'm actually curious what other people have to say on that front.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think the one thing too is the number one thing I learned from getting a degree in general women's studies was the concept about redefining and renaming things to continue to innovate and excel. And I think mentorship has a real loaded term, right? Because it's very much like I have to invest X amount of time. This is a lifelong relationship. And I'm also working 60 hours a week and I have children. Right. And so I think the one thing is like there's a way to redefine mentorship. If the goal ultimately is about mapping out your career in the cloud and about also to what success is and what are your challenges, I like to think of it more as like accountability. How are you being accountable to yourself, and how are you finding others to help you be accountable in your career objectives, not just for you but also for your teams? And I think that's really helpful. I'm wondering, for before we go into the next question, I'm wondering for you, Madeline, how has the not just the Skycrafters community, which is a phenomenal community, again, to anyone who is viewing this recording and or live, please check it out. We do have a ton of some pre-submitted questions that are coming in through the Q&A, so I want to make sure we get to those. But Madeline, for you, can you speak a little bit more about this question around mentorship and accountability in your career?
Sure. I'd have to echo. I've had some informal mentoring for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a lot of people who influence your career, influence your life, and you get to sort of define how you want that impact. Like, I think mentorship is really it's really up to you to seek it out.
Mm.
You can't just assume that somebody's going to come by and be like, "Oh, you seem like a nice person. I'm gonna give you a bunch of my time." Um, you know, Generally, a lot of the people who do mentor others, they're very busy people, and you kind of have to seek them out and say, "Hey, I really, enjoyed your talk on this thing, or I read your blog post, and would you have time for a coffee to chat about it? I'd love to get your perspective on this other thing." I think you really have to seek out those opportunities for yourself and establish those relationships. And if you do want a formal mentorship relationship, um, I think then you have to be very clear about what that means to you and to the mentor, and set some boundaries and some ground rules and set your expectations, because otherwise the mentor doesn't know what you're after and what your goal is, right? So I think there's a lot that you can do to help yourself in that space.
100%. And I will just say very quickly as well, shout out to all of you that are submitting your questions right now. There are some good ones coming up, and we are so excited to get those in our live Q&A. Zabi is on fire, and I'm here for it. I just want to go kind of piggyback off this a little bit here. We're thinking a little bit more, thinking about careers, and you all have had very different experiences. I'm wondering for you all as managers, like for our viewers, what are some emerging careers in the cloud space that you're seeing show up as you're starting to accept new applications? And I'm going to ask that over to my Rachel.
So I'm not a manager exactly, and so it's not something that I certainly do interview
Yeah.
people, but
Yeah.
yeah, I feel like there's a big debate about like whether or not DevOps engineer is a role, because there's such like a broad swath of like what is a DevOps engineer? Like you could have 10 that never do the same thing, or
Yeah.
they're just like so different. And so I think that's one thing that's kind of hard is it's kind of like this nebulous title that could mean so many different things.
Mhm.
And so just kind of trying to figure out what to do under that umbrella.
Do you feel though too like that there's so many different parts of that title? Do you feel like that gives you a little bit more freedom, because I know that you're taking on an exciting new opportunity soon? Did you feel like that title opened up some more doors for you because it was more broad? Or I'm just curious. Off the script, Jill. Totally off the script. Don't mind us.
Yeah, I think it depends on the organization where you're at and how much flexibility there is to do things. Because if you're at like a huge Fortune 500, then you might be in like a super niche part of a CI/CD pipeline, for example, and you might not get to play with some other piece of infrastructure. Or if you're at like a small organization where you kind of have to wear all the hats, then there is a lot more flexibility for that. So I think it kind of depends on that.
And my same question back to you, Madeline, because I know that you have a team of 7 now. And this was a great question from Zabi as well. Just wondering a little bit more around like, what are some emerging new roles and job titles that maybe we should be aware of for our global audience watching?
Yeah, I think it is a hard question because everybody calls jobs by different names.
Correct.
I actually really dislike when people call something a DevOps engineer role, because to me DevOps isn't it's not a job that you do, it's a culture.
Can you say that again? Can you say that again?
Yeah, I'll just preach. DevOps to me isn't a job that one person does or a team of people do. It's a culture that you have to get everybody on board with. And it's really hard to shift your whole organization's culture. So yeah, I really dislike when companies are like, yes, we're hiring a DevOps engineer who's going to work on our pipelines. I'm like, well, no, you're hiring a CI/CD specialist. So I think there's lots of opportunities these days for people who have experience in the cloud, who have experience automating things in general, whether that's creating CI/CD pipelines or automated testing or scripting, like Mary Kay mentioned earlier. I think when you're looking for a job, you really have to read the descriptions, not the title, because, like I said, people call things by so many different names. So yeah, if there's like an area that you're really interested in, I would encourage you to like seek out that and look for that as part of those job descriptions. And
Yeah.
be wary of ones that are like super vague because it could mean that you're only doing feature work, or it could mean you're doing something where you're wearing all the hats, and that's not for everybody.
Is that resonating with you, Mary Kay?
Oh yeah, I've had a few made up titles. I think I was a cloud technology, no, customer technology specialist and a cloud technology specialist at one point. Yeah. So no, for sure.
Well, and you'd say for you too, though, Mary Kay, because you've said now, while you've been a leader, right? And we talked about this before, my definition of a leader is someone who's leading projects and or teams. You are now a manager. So when you're looking at candidates, how are you keeping a pulse on, emerging titles and roles and how that fits into the business needs for y'all?
Well, actually, so recently I've actually been looking for a new person. So I've noticed that I don't even look at your title. I'm mostly looking at your skill set. I'm looking at at what you've been up to and what you're doing because titles are almost meaningless. Because like you said, cloud DevOps, and unfortunately, that's the name of my title that I'm looking.
I know. How
You
embarrassing.
to
So
rename
sorry.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So no, it actually doesn't matter to me whatever your title is. It's what have you been up to? What have you been doing? What projects are you working on? What technologies have you touched? That type of thing.
Mhm, mhm. I think that's super, super helpful. And I think it's a great segue. And again, y'all are on fire in the Q&A. These sessions go by so quickly. So again, to anyone who's watching live and or anyone who's watching this recording, we want to continue the conversation in the Skycrafts community, but we're going to do our best to get you all the answers you deserve live because you're here, which I think is a great segue too for Mary Kay. And this was a really interesting question from Johan. And I think this is valid when we're thinking a little bit more around skills, right? Because I tell everyone I'm a recovering social worker that fell into test automation community management, but I did have a brief post social worker life as a recruiter, and I helped recruit 118 people in 1 year. And when I did that, I was always telling hiring managers, listen, you need to focus. It's not just, and candidates too, it's not just about your resume. It's about your LinkedIn, your network. It's about your network on Twitter. It's about the number of open source repositories that you've repos you contributed to. It's about what blogs you publish. It's about what conferences you've spoken at. They're looking at the holistic package as a hiring manager. And this question from Johan, I really appreciate it. And they're asking, how do you think the increase of public registries, code libraries, containers, infrastructure as code, GitHub Actions, and open source is changing the skills required to be a successful cloud engineer? That's a good question.
That's a good question. Yeah, and yeah, it's one of those things that people have to know a little bit of a lot of that. So, what I've seen is a lot of the people that I work with,
Mm-hmm.
they've been in the industry for a long time, and so
Yep.
sometimes you can get static and stale, and you're not learning the new stuff. And to some of them, some of this containers, it's a little scary.
Sure.
It's way out of their wheelhouse. So yeah, so knowing, like I said, a little bit of a lot helps. So I don't think I don't expect anybody to be a deep dive expert, in Docker necessarily. Let's just say, but if they know a little bit of Docker and they know a little bit of Lambda, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, I'm happy with that because you have that broad breadth of experience and knowledge, and that's kind of what I'm looking for. It's like, can I give you a project and you go dig in, figure it out, and work with it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love that. And I think that goes back to as well. Are you hiring, Madeline? I'm just curious.
I mean, my company's pretty much always hiring.
Yeah.
I myself don't create the recs, but yeah.
And given that question as well, that Mary Kay just answered as well, what are your thoughts on that? Do you echo, or what is your experience?
So I think if you can have that experience, that's great. If you have the time to go and explore some of those technologies, a lot of it is free. I'll just put that out there. You can go and play with, AWS or Google Cloud, and there's a free tier for everything. There's lots of tutorials out there. So I think if you have the time and the ability to go and explore some of those technologies, even if you haven't done them as part of your job, I think that is really helpful. But myself, like I think what I look for the most would be two things:
Mm.
your ability to learn
Mm-hmm.
and your ability to problem solve.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm actually looking for how do you communicate with me? Like, so say we're in a technical interview, right? And I give you a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes people sit there and they think to themselves and they're just like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I would do this. But if you walk me through your process and you're telling me about how you're actually working through this problem and you communicate that to me, that gives me a lot more insight, into how you actually work, right? How you would actually fit in. Um, and so I would actually, take a candidate who had no experience, but was able to demonstrate that they wanted to learn. They were eager to learn. They had lots that they um, know that they don't know, and that ability to communicate their problem solving process. I think those are kind of the major things for me. Because, like I said, there's a lot of technology changing all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So, what you're working with in your current job might be completely separate and different from what you would be working on in the job, I might be interviewing you for.
Mhm. And I love that. And I think that's a really, really important point. And that's something that Xavi and just I'm loving these Q&A questions again, y'all. We like to keep these free flowing. Chime in the chat if you have been to so many of these sessions that are static and boring. Not with y'all though. Y'all are on fire. I'm so tired of meetups and webinars where it's boring and y'all are on fire in the chat. And I want to appreciate you host as well. And Debbie had a great, great, great question. I want to shoot this one back over to Rachel because this is so topical. We talked about emerging technologies, right? And we talked about things to look out for. So I want to know, because technology comes and goes and evolves, what are the aging technologies that we should, maybe sunset or we should start letting go out of our periphery?
Yeah, I'm hesitant to name anything in particular, but I guess the way I would think
Names,
about
yeah,
this.
let's not name technology names because we also love everyone. But maybe there, you could share some attributes of technologies without naming that people could maybe reprioritize in their continuous learning adventure.
Yeah, I think the way I would look at that is if there is something that can be, if there's something kind of foundational or fundamental that can be created as a service, it's probably not worth becoming an expert in that service unless it's something that, like, I'm just thinking of something for like Active Directory, like why should I know much about Active Directory if I can, spin that up on AWS and just plug into it that way? Just kind of thinking of the things that I can leverage on AWS that I don't need to become an expert in, which will then allow me to focus on how can I meet the needs of the developers that I'm working with. And I think it's specific because there obviously are technologies that you can become an expert in and want to become an expert in, but I'm just trying to think of, given the needs that I have, what things what things do I not have to worry about and can just pay someone else to do through the company to do it for us?
Mm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's important too. And that's my thing as well, is like, I don't understand why people are trying to be experts in all these different things when there are technologies out there that can just help you automate and streamline so you can focus more on the things that you really need to do, not just for your teams, but for your business. And I think that's a really important question that Tabitha brought up as well in the Q&A. And Tabitha was saying, when being the jack of all trades, you know a little bit about many things, but you're never really an expert in one particular thing. Do you think that it's better to know many things only a little bit over knowing things really well off? Um, I love this question, Tabitha. I love this question. And I'm going to shoot this one back over to Mary Kay. So for Mary Kay, being a jack of all trades, right? Thinking a little bit about trying to know everything. Do you think that it is better to know many things only a little bit over knowing one thing really well?
I'm going to say, for the most part, being a jack of all trades is probably how I got to where I am today. you know? I mean, it's yeah, I'm just thinking about over the past and things that I've done and such like that, and I don't have time to sometimes become that in-depth expert. People will call me a Linux expert here at work. I'm like, I'm not Linus Torvald. I am not an expert. I'm yeah, that's my definition of an expert. I'm not going to write a Linux kernel. But I know a little bit of that. I still know some of the Unix stuff. I know VMware. I know AWS. I know a little bit of a lot of things and stuff like that. And so, I feel like it makes me more universal, and because I can talk the talk at least. So I think I prefer to be more of a jack of all trades than it may be slightly in depth on a few things. I'm not saying that I don't have that depth, but I am not an expert in anything.
And who is an expert in anything? I'm sorry.
I don't
I'm
know. You
sorry.
can't be, not with the way technology changes too. If anyone ever tells me they're an AWS expert or something, I'm gonna tell them they're lying. You know.
I think it's part of that too, right? As we're talking about continuous learning and we're talking about being an expert, but like thought leaders, experts, I get it. We all have core competencies that are important for us to prioritize to deliver for our business and for our teams and also the software quality and delivery. But I will say on the flip side, can we reframe that as things that we're also really, really passionate about, things that really, really excite us, like technologies that we get us like excited, as like fellow geeks to geeks, like what are the technologies that get us excited when we wake up in the morning, and how can we align that excitement with the business and delivering results? I'm wondering for you, Madeline, as a fellow continuous learner, is any of this resonating with you?
Yeah, actually, and with the jack of all trades,
Mhm.
I think the way I've heard it described before, and I don't remember where this came from, was T-shaped.
Mm.
So you actually go like really deep into one sort of area where you, like you said, you're passionate about it, something that, or it's, the core competency.
Mhm.
And then the top of your T is, you know a little bit about these other things.
Mhm.
Um, and so some people are maybe more like, I don't know, multiple T's where you're a
Yeah.
little
Yeah,
deeper.
yeah, yeah,
I think that sort of analogy to me is the right approach. Like,
yeah. Mhm.
um, I like knowing a lot personally because I like learning. I like knowing a lot about different areas, but I know that I don't have the time to invest in being a deep knowledge on all of those areas. So I've picked a few. Personally, I like infrastructure as code, and I like, being able to deploy things quickly and easily and that sort of stuff. Um, so I'm not an expert in Golang or in automation or testing or things like that, but I know enough about those things that I can do a code review or I can help out my team or I know who to ask, right? So I think that's the way I like to look at it.
Mhm, mhm. And I think that's one of the other things that I've loved too is like earlier in the green room we were geeking out and we were talking about books. And one of the things that I think is important is that we are not all going to be a jack of all trades. We're not going to know everything. We're not going to be an expert in domain in everything. But it's also really important for you all who are tuning in. Or watching this or managers out there, part of what I think makes work so important and makes us deliver software faster is the ability to make work visible and to also help make uh, reduce time theft. And I think that's really important, whether you are a manager, in my opinion, everyone is a leader. Some of you lead teams and or projects. And if I may really fast, can we, can we, can we? We can. Raphael, are you getting a screenshot of this? Mm-hmm. Yeah, because as RuPaul says, reading is, thank you. Reading is fundamental. And I wanted to go into this topic, right? As leaders in your cloud careers and mapping your success in your future, what would you say for you is the number one time theft? And how do you reduce that and steal back your time? I'm gonna go to Rachel.
I think for me,
Yeah.
let's see, I think for me, I try and time block a lot of my time when I can because there's so many times when, like, if I hear that Slack notification or a text message come through, it's so easy to just go down that rabbit hole of like, oh, and then I need to do this other thing and I forgot to schedule that one thing. And so for me, I try and just block out. I think that's why time block helps me is
Mhm.
just being able to block out other things. And for this half hour, 1 hour, whatever, I'm just going to focus and let my mind get into the process of whatever it is that I've blocked off and trying to focus on things that way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think that's really important too. And I think the other part as well is that there's that um, God bless Google Fiber. God bless Google Fiber. It's really not all it's hyped up to be, but we love you, Google Fiber. But going back as well to that idea of blocking off time to steal back that time, I think you said it so well, Rachel, because you can't continue to give your time away and go down a rabbit hole. There was a recent study that I really loved by the State of DevOps report, and they were stating that high performers in their study are able to spend 28% more time on planned work. Unplanned work is considered a measure of quality because more unplanned work, the less time for creating value. Shameless plug again for this book. It's true. It's true. And so, same question back to you because I fundamentally truly believe that ruthless prioritization of tasks is so key to advancing your career, whether you're in the cloud industry, wherever. I'm wondering for you, Mary Kay, how do you steal back that time so that you can help advocate and deliver results, not just for your team, but for your business as well?
So the same type of thing. I've been trying to block out my time as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
With some success, limited. I'm still working on it.
Mm-hmm.
Work
Mm-hmm.
in progress.
We call it a whip.
I have that customer service response. Somebody emails me. I'm like, I'm constantly, constantly trying to, get them an answer right away, and
Sure.
it's hard to break yourself of that.
Mm-hmm.
But then, another thing that former managers is fond of saying too is like, it goes kind of to that automation. If you have to do a same task more than once, then you need to, automate it in some way, shape, or form. So sometimes it's looking at some of these tasks that I'm doing and it's analyzing, really, should I be doing this? Is
Mm.
this something that should be delegated to somebody else? Is there an automatic response? Should we, look at this in a whole new light, and should we change the way we're doing things? So some of that, it takes some effort and some time to
Mm-hmm.
work through those processes or whatnot. But in the end, that will save you time in the long run.
Mm-hmm. And I think it goes, I 100% agree. And I think part of it goes down to how do we come up with a system for saying, hey, listen, all hands on deck during an incident does not need to happen every time there's an incident because there are way too many incidences. And how do we also reduce unnecessary dependencies? Spoiler alert, it's people. And I see Madeline laughing as well because we were literally like vibing off the same book. I do though know that our time is limited. And I also know for all of you who are chiming in with the Q&A, so many good questions, and we want you to continue this conversation in the Skycrafters community. It is an amazing community of leaders that are here to support you on your continuous learning journey, latest emerging technologies, concrete examples for how you can scale your teams, and also to just an ability to connect with other leaders. So shameless plug again for the Skycrafters community. You have to check it out. I will though say, um, I think that for y'all, this is a question that I really wanted to ask you all. And this is tool agnostic. This is career agnostic for any sector. I'm wondering for y'all, what's the best piece of advice that you ever got from a boss and or a mentor, and why? And I want to go to my Rachel for this one.
I think for me, one thing I was told that has really stuck, and it's kind of hard sometimes, is to say
Mm-hmm.
yes to opportunities. Like,
Mm,
there's so many times where somebody will ask me to do something, and I'm just like, really don't want to do that. But when I say yes, I find that I tend to learn so much more, and I've ended up in situations where I've just grown so much because yeah, I just put myself in a situation that I wouldn't have been in before. And it's kind of like leaning into the discomfort and just, putting yourself outside of your comfort zone
mhm.
so that, you can really grow. And so, yeah, just saying yes to opportunities. Obviously, if you have more on your plate than you can handle, saying yes to more work is not going to help. But, if it's something that you do have the ability to do, saying yes is good.
Hmm. And how has that helped you in your continuous journey in mapping out your career in this industry? Like, how has that helped you specifically?
I think just through networking, just opportunities of, maybe there was like a talk that I, was very anxious to give, but I said, yes, I'll give that talk. And then I,
Mhm.
studied up more on this technology and ended up using it more in work, which might lead to this new job and just things like that, like trying to, yeah, I would say that that's what I think.
I love that. And I'm going to ask you the same question, Mary Kay. What's the best piece of advice that you got from a former boss and or a mentor? And how has that helped you on your journey continuing in this industry?
That is a tough one, and I agree with everything Rachel said for sure. Because I've kind of had the same kind of experience type of thing. So like the job I had now, when I first read the job description, I wasn't 100% sure it was something I wanted to do. It ended up being a really great opportunity, but
Mhm.
you just don't know.
Mhm.
Um, where was I going to go with that? So I guess on the flip side of that is also
Mm.
knowing when to say no. That's the other thing. So, yeah, and somebody said this recently, and I totally agree with it. It is so hard to say no to a person, but you can say no to a task.
Can you say that again? Can you say that again?
Yeah, it's hard to say no to a person, but you got to think about it as saying no to the task.
Mm.
There are occasionally that I'll get emails that are things that I really shouldn't be working on, things I've delegated or moved off my plate, that type of thing. And I really want to help people because that's just me. But and that's what I don't want to. I don't want to say, Madeline, no, I'm sorry. I don't want to do that. It's not really something I should be doing. But so you have to look at it a little more objectively. You have to say, look, I'm not saying no to you. I'm saying no to the task. This is not my task. This should be somebody else's. And I think Raviel and I actually talked about this recently too. It should be going to somebody else maybe because that other person might not be getting as much opportunity, things like that. Maybe it belongs with another team or something like that. That team needs that work. You need to share your knowledge. You need to enable them.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so it's kind of the opposite too. Say yes to new opportunities, but then no also when to say no when it's really something you should not, you shouldn't be doing anymore maybe.
I 100% agree. And I think that's a big thing. And I think part of it is also empowering people to have connections so you're not the gatekeeper and passing over. And I think that's I'm going to ask you the same question, Madeline, because I really do believe this is an important question as people are mapping out their careers in this industry. Best piece of advice you ever got from a boss and or mentor, and how did that help you continue to advance your career in cloud?
Yeah, so this is very different from Rachel
I
and
love
Mary
it.
Kate.
I love it. I love it.
So I did my first internship between third and fourth year of university.
Mm-hmm.
And before that, I really had like zero tech experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I was going into a 4-month internship. And then in fourth year, I was going to be applying to full-time jobs. And so I was only going to have that 4 months of experience,
Sure.
which is a little bit, I gotta say, it's not a lot of experience. But if you can make the most of it and sell it the right way, then you've done your job. Um, and so what I was told going into that, I think it might have even been from my mom, was to be a sponge and absorb everything you can. And I still do that to this day. I feel like every person you come across at work or in life can teach you something. And it might not be the thing you're expecting to learn from them. But every person that you meet can teach you something, and you can absorb all of that experience and all of that knowledge. And yeah, I was super challenged with different projects. I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know how to use GitHub. I didn't know anything. And I walked away from that with so much more of an understanding of how software development careers actually work and how what you do all day as a software developer, because we didn't get that in my program at school. So yeah, I would say be a sponge, absorb all of the knowledge, all the expertise, everything you can from the people around you, and just be open to doing that.
I think that's powerful. And I think, again, not to go back to this book, but I really do believe that there is a power in helping make people's invisible work visible so that cross-functionally, wherever you are, in assisted life cycle, like wherever you are, you're shining a light on others. And I will say at Testim, it was really important for us during I call it a global panini because you have to bring some light in these dark times, and it's also pride, and I just want some bread, so here we are. But I think that like this idea, how do you shine a light on others, and how do you make their invisible work more visible? It will help you and your teams deliver better quality software, and for your business as well. And so this webinar is not brought to you by Hey Taco, but I will say find a visibility app that works for you and your global teams, and shine a light on them. We give 5 tacos away a day. Every 2 weeks, I celebrate, whoever has the most tacos. I know y'all in tech, y'all are competitive. As a recovering social worker that fell into tech, I'm like, y'all are competitive. And as one of 11 children, I am so here for it. But I will say that being able to create infrastructure where your teams feel valued and visible. How many times have you seen the VP of R&D give tacos away to product? It can happen. It can happen if you make your work visible. And I will say as well, I want to thank you all on this panel today so much. I want to make sure though, real fast, we do rapid fire. This isn't scripted. We want to continue the conversation in the community, but I want to rapid fire. What are you the most excited for in this year? Rachel, most excited for in 2021? Rachel.
Kubernetes.
Yes, I love that. Mary Kay.
In-person conferences.
Yes. Yes. Madeline, most excited for
I'd say getting back into the office one day.
Okay.
People in person again. Yeah.
I love that. I think it's so powerful. And again, I don't know about y'all, but everyone here is in back-to-back meetings. We have hard stops. So I want to give you back the 54 seconds that you have as you make your way to the next meeting. And I want to say thank you so much to the Skycrafters community. Thank you so much to panelists and to everyone whose questions we didn't get answered live. Continue the conversation in the community. It is a great space to learn. I want to do a special shout out to Raphael and to Jamie. You all have created an inclusive community of continuous learning that everyone should be proud to join. So shout out to you all and to you panelists, Mary Kay, Madeline, and Rachel. I'm like, I just have to meet you in person. You all are so special. So thank you so much. Just joys, joys. From all of us here, we love you. Please continue to map out your career in the cloud and know that you can reach out to the community, and continuous learning is everywhere. We love you and we'll talk soon. Stay blessed, be well, stay you. Bye.